Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jonno White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jonno White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest, and I was just saying to him how much I've been looking forward to this episode, very excited to have Guy Kawasaki on the podcast. Guy is the Chief Evangelist at Canva and is the host of the Remarkable People podcast. Welcome to my podcast, Guy.
Thank you. It's a privilege and honor.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you. First of all, for our listeners, many people will know of you or be familiar with your work, and may even be familiar with your podcast. But just can you give a bit of an overview of, particularly at the moment, what you're doing?
I am chief evangelist of an Australian company, Canva, located in Sydney, Australia, and I am the host of the Remarkable People podcast. And that's about it.
No, that's good. And I've been looking forward to asking this question for a while because I love hearing people's stories.
Yeah.
And as you look back on your on your life and your leadership so far, and even back as far as childhood, I'd love for you to share some of the moments that really shaped you becoming the leader and the person you are today.
Well, how long have you got? I have a lot of stories that shape me. So I am from Honolulu, Hawaii. I come from a lower middle class family in a lower middle class place. And what shaped me, well, first of all, a sixth grade teacher convinced my parents to take me out of the public school system in Hawaii and put me in the private school college prep system.
Hmm.
And that changed the arc of my life because I went to this college prep school. This college prep school, I don't know why, somehow convinced me to apply to Stanford. I got into Stanford. There I met someone who recruited me into Apple, and the rest is history. So none of that would have happened if I had stayed in Hawaii. So that's number one. Number two, believe it or not, I used to catch the bus to school, and twice I was robbed on the bus or at a bus stop or in the bus. And I have to tell you, the the good news out of that is that I vowed that I would not live in a place where I was going to get robbed, and I would not be taking public transportation. So
Wow.
those two incidences of crime
Mm.
really influenced my life. And then a third incident, you probably are saying, Guy, I should have never asked you this question. A third incident is that a family friend gave me a ride in his Porsche 911. This is when I was in high school. And oh my God, I said, I have got to get a car like this. I don't, whatever, show me what to study, show me how hard to work. I am going to do this. And fast forward 4 or 5 years later, I'm in college, and my roommate was from a very wealthy family in Arizona. And so I visit him once, and his father
Mm.
picks us up in a Rolls Royce. So my head is exploding. We go to his house, which is the back. His backyard is the golf course for the Arizona Biltmore Hotel, which is a highly, highly prestigious property in Phoenix.
Yeah.
And we go out to dinner, and his mom asked me to drive her home. So I drive her home in her Ferrari Daytona. And once again, I said, you know what, Guy? I mean, this is where it's at. And so I know many people have much better stories about denting the universe, overcoming poverty, making the world a better place. But I got to tell you, man, I was not motivated by changing the world. I was motivated by changing the car.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. Thank you for sharing that. It's it's always and it's always fascinating, isn't it? I mean, if I think about my journey in leadership, I would love to say it's always been so altruistic, but there's definitely been moments where I was actually just thinking about this yesterday, to tell you the truth, where I thought, you know what, I remember just longing to impact a lot of people and just longing to be able to get up and do something. And I remember even sort of in the shower, just like imagining being speaking in front of like massive groups of people. And some of that's probably Jonno. There's
Yeah.
probably a bit of ego in that. But then there's also something that I think that's what I was thinking about yesterday, going, I don't know if that's normal. I think there's something about that that's my story, and that's been formative. And part of the reason I'm doing something like this is because at a younger age, I was imagining that was a bit of a dream I had.
There you go. So, yeah, you have much more noble
Oh, I don't
origins
know.
than I do.
I don't know. I don't know about that. Well, I want to hear you. You do, you know, incredible work in so many different spheres, and have such an amazing background with the different things you've done. When you were, I guess, when you think about a young Guy Kawasaki, in terms of you might have been driven by the idea of the car rather than, change the car rather than changing the world. But do you remember having? I like that. It's a good catchphrase. Do you remember? Do you remember having an aha moment when you were younger about entrepreneurship? And because you're obviously very entrepreneurial and very, I like the way you think outside the box. Did you have a moment where you thought, wow, okay, maybe the way I think is a bit different to other people, or maybe I can do this and make something of myself that's different to what I expected? Do you remember a moment like that?
Nope. I was fascinated with Hewlett Packard and National Semiconductor, and coming to the mainland from Hawaii, it just kind of removed the scales from my eyes, because in Hawaii, if you were successful, highly successful, you were working in the hotel business, the agricultural business, state government, something like that. There was no sort of there was no real startup
Mm.
environment, and maybe you owned a store or a restaurant, but there was no Hewlett Packard around there. And I came to Silicon Valley and I saw, you know, what entrepreneurship could truly mean. And let's just say the scales were removed from my eyes.
Mm. What did you find most surprising? What was it about Hewlett Packard compared to, the different opportunities that you'd seen in Hawaii that caught you most, made your eyes light up the most?
Well, just the impact, the sheer dollar amount of sales is, it's one thing to have a successful restaurant. It's quite another to have a Hewlett Packard, right? And so, those were the kind of things that it boggled my mind. Coming from Hawaii, it boggled my mind. There's such wealth and such impact.
Mm.
And I know I am coming off like a truly materialistic punk, but on the other hand, you can't say I'm dishonest. I'm telling you the truth. I don't need to. I think there are a lot of people who look back on their lives and they sort of reinvent history, right? Like, I always wanted to make the world a better place for the disenfranchised. Okay. Uh,
Yeah.
how do you define always?
Yeah. No, I love your honesty.
So,
It's great. It's great vulnerability and being honest about what might have been some initial motivations that when you went there and you went to Silicon Valley, did you feel like it fit you straight away, or did it take you a while to feel at home there?
well, I was totally intimidated. I mean,
Mm.
coming from Hawaii, where a big deal was running a drugstore, yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. And then I went to work for Apple after college, and working for Steve Jobs, that's a mind expanding exercise in and of itself. So, I just listen. I'm very fortunate,
Mm.
and I've been lucky, and I'm willing to work hard. That is a pretty good combination.
Hmm.
Actually, either one can make you successful, but both are really, really powerful combination.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
I want to tell people that, if they're listening to this and they're having these negative thoughts like, "What a jackass!" He didn't want to make the world a better place. He just wanted a Porsche, which is a fair interpretation of what I just said. But I think the deeper message, if there is a deep message, is that you know it doesn't matter what motivates you. What
Mm.
matters is that you get motivated. And so I
Mm.
wanted to change the car. I wanted a better life. And so that's why I worked hard and studied hard and, did all this kind of stuff. You may want to dent the universe.
Mm.
As long as you get motivated and I get motivated, that's all that matters. And from there, let's see how it plays out. So I think that's a very important lesson. You don't have to have this motivation that you feel like if you're in a beauty contest and in a beauty in these beauty contests, there's always this like 60 seconds. So what motivates you? What makes you, you know, tick? what do you want to accomplish in your life? And nobody says I want to change from a Toyota to a Porsche, okay, in those contests.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, there's a lot of people in beauty contests who are thinking, "Oh man, I just don't want to work in Starbucks.
Yeah.
That's my motivation." But you think they're going to
Yeah.
say that? No, they're going to say, world peace.
Oh, that's so true. So you must get asked this all the time, but when you went to work for Steve Jobs, um, are there any, and you might have shared some of these elsewhere, but I just have to ask anyway. It's one of my favorite books that I've read is the Walter Isaacson biography of Steve Jobs. Just a wonderful.
Yeah,
I was laughing out loud reading through that book just because I found the stories as a person who loves leadership. I just found the stories and the nuances and the realities that were reflected in that just so brilliant. Do you have any favorite stories that you can share with listeners from your time at Apple?
sure. So first of all, I did not read that book, and I really don't read any books about Apple.
Mm,
Uh, and it's maybe it's a little bit of PTSD. I don't know how many Vietnam War veterans read Vietnam War books. Okay,
sure.
but um, I just when I read these and I see these inaccuracies, it just bugs me. So I just don't read them. And I was there, so I know what happened. I don't
Yeah.
need to have somebody interviewing somebody who I don't even know. A lot of times these sources, I'm saying to myself, who is this source who claims to be inside of Apple and really knows all this stuff? But anyway, so my favorite story, and a story that just illustrates everything in a nutshell, is one
Yeah.
day I'm in my cubicle working, and Steve shows up with a total stranger. And he asked me what I thought of a company and its software. And I told him the software and company were mediocre. It wasn't strategic for us. And at the end of this diatribe, he says to me, I want you to meet the CEO of the company. So he totally set me up for that. And that was a really interesting moment in my life, let's just say.
And the CEO was standing right there while you were saying what you thought.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Uh, and so
And that's what it was like at Apple. You
yeah.
had to, you had to prove yourself every day. Every day.
And are there any leadership lessons that you see in the way you lead today and the way you lead others that you really particularly link back to your time at Apple, where you think, yeah, that was probably the way I do that is very linked to that season, like you said that you just described as being on the inside of probably what a lot of people misunderstand, but you were there. Are there any things that you do and lessons that you see yourself doing today that really link back to there?
Well, I think that one of the lessons I learned is that your current customer would have great difficulty explaining to you how to truly revolutionize your business. They can tell you how to make it better or faster and cheaper, but they can't tell you how to fundamentally change it because
Mm.
it's not in their wheelhouse, right? So if you're buying an Apple II from Apple and Apple asks you, well, what would you like next? They're going to say a bigger, faster, cheaper Apple II. They're not going to tell you to build a Macintosh. And if
Yeah.
you're buying Macintoshes, they're not going to tell you, oh, make me an iPod. So that's one thing I learned. Another thing I learned about personnel is you should hire people who are better at their job than you are. And so
Mm.
if you look around the room and the person running engineering is better than you in engineering, and accounting is better in accounting, and sales is better, and operations is better, and HR is better, that should be a great source of pride.
Yes.
As we say, A players hire A players, or even better, A players hire A plus players. But there are
Yes.
many people who want to look around the room and say, I'm the big dog here. I am
Mm.
superior to everyone in this room. If you ever have that going through your brain, you are a loser. I mean, there's
Mm.
no question. You are a loser. You're an insecure loser.
I think you hit the nail on the head because I've certainly seen that where I only realized it recently, and it's come up a few times on the podcast that great leaders. It's one of the big differentiators I think that I've noticed is that something that holds back poor leaders and that they have in common when people leave them and they get frustrated and is that they have this obsession with being smartest in the room. And I don't know if there's any self-awareness of it, but I certainly see great leaders being
Yeah.
very comfortable being the dumbest person in the room and going, "That's great. That in fact, that's a win."
Well, ideally, it wouldn't be too easy to be the dumbest person in the room. No, excuse me, I said that wrong. Ideally, it wouldn't be too easy for you to be. I'm so confused. Like, this is like a double negative, right? Basically, it should be hard to be smarter than you, but you still want them smarter than you.
Yeah, you want to be as smart as you can and hire people that are smarter than you. That's the whole A to A plus
Yeah.
thing, right? You want to be an A
I'm
leader
not
and
saying
hire
oh
A
be a
pluses.
dummy. Exactly.
That's good. Uh, what you said first is I find is really challenging, which is, and I see it all the time. I think we even set ourselves
Yeah.
up by doing market research with our customers. What would you like to see us do differently? And I think you nailed it. It's like, I would love to see bigger, better, faster, and cheaper. Please, would be wonderful. And we scratch our
Right.
heads and go, how are we going to do this? So how? And I know this has been you've thought very deeply about this, and it's probably been a big part of your life sort of work. How do we do that? What would you say to a leader who's pulling their hair out going, I have to create the next thing in terms of in my business, but I'm struggling to see beyond customers asking for bigger, faster, better, and cheaper? Like, how do you do it differently?
um, well, that's where luck comes into it. And well, one path is you build the product that you want to use, and then you just hope
Yeah.
you're not the only nutcase that wants to use it. I would say that would be a very good guide. It's not. I mean, that's why it's hard to be innovative. And well, another path logically
Hmm.
would be acquisition. That
Yeah,
you
yeah,
need
yeah,
to buy out people who are about to kill you.
yeah.
Um, that's just the way it is.
No, I think they're two really good tips, and I think sometimes we love to be a little bit idealistic with this, but I love the realistic advice you just gave, which is what would you design the product that you would love to use, and hope you're not the only nutcase who would love to use it, and look at acquiring who's already made something that is that next generation beyond what customers are asking for and what they actually truly will want and will need, and see if you can acquire them. I think that's really wise advice.
Well, I hope that people take this to heart. That uh, it's very difficult, and I think that's what makes Apple a $1 trillion company. Is
Hmm.
that they went from Apple One to no, not all of these success. What I'm about to rattle off. Okay,
Yeah.
it went from Apple One to Apple Two to Apple Three to Mac to Lisa to Macintosh to Newton to iPhone, iPod, iPad, and roughly 50% of those were winners. But I mean, 50% is a much higher batting average than most companies, and it's also 50% of 8 or 9 things. It's not 50% of 2 things.
Hmm.
So now, how did they do that? Well, I mean, that's why Steve Jobs was a unicorn who farted pixie dust. I mean, they don't come along that often. And so, it's not a strategy to say, all right, so my strategy is I'm going to be the next Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Because I hate to tell you, statistically, you're not the next Steve Jobs. Just give it up. The odds of you being the next Steve Jobs, just ask Elizabeth Holmes, are zero. It's zero. So that's the wrong test for you.
Hmm. What would you say? I mean, there'd be a lot of leaders listening uh who maybe are trying to work
They,
out maybe
they
someone.
tuned out. They tuned out when I said my motivation wasn't getting a Porsche. They
I,
hung up. They went to listen to Joe Rogan or something.
I think a lot of them are nodding along in the car, going, "Yeah, no, that's true. That's me,
Yeah.
me too, guy." What advice would you give them if it's not about being Steve Jobs? What do you think if you were sitting one on one with a leader who was saying, "I just really want to be the next Steve Jobs," and you say, "Well, that's not realistic." What is a realistic sort of approach for a leader in 2022 when we're recording this to really? I guess, to be successful in business? What should we be aspiring to do and to be? How do you think about that?
Well, I think that you should, well, there's two paths. One is build the product that you want
Hmm.
and just hope you're not the only nutcase that wants it. So I already explained that.
Yeah.
And that has worked very well in tech. Although, it's kind of selective reasoning because you only remember the successes. You don't remember all the people who built the product they want, and they were the only people who wanted it. But I would say that percentage wise, that's the richest game, the richest vein. I'm not saying it's 100%, but it's richer than, oh, I'm going to read the McKinsey report and then decide on, making this kind of company because it's a hot sector. I
Mm.
don't agree with that theory. So
Mm.
that's one theory. Build the product you want, and I would also I would also say that the key word here is empathy. So can you walk in the shoes of your customer
Yeah.
or potential customer? Now, I with the caveat that empathy is difficult because it's you really have to walk in their shoes. You can't just intellectualize, oh, what would it be like for, somebody like this? And so I'll give you an example of true empathy. So
Yeah.
there's a guy named Martin Lindstrom who I interviewed for my podcast. And he talks about teaching empathy to a large pharmaceutical company who wanted to, quote unquote, get closer to its customer.
Mm.
So, typically when you hire someone to help you get closer to your customer, you do focus groups, right?
Yeah.
And then you bring these people into a room and you pay them $100 for an hour or two, and they're sitting next to each other and they're each trying to sound smart so that the person sitting next to them don't think they're stupid. I mean, that's how focus groups work,
Mm-hmm.
which means that, everybody's everybody's going to be bullshitting everybody else.
Yeah.
So instead, what he did is he took the executives of that company, he put them in a room, he gave them straws, and he said, all right, for the next few minutes, you breathe through the straw. Of course, some executives couldn't do it and hated it. And he said, well, you're a pharmaceutical company. You have medicine for asthmatics. That's what it feels like to have asthma. You want to feel empathy? Breathe through the straw. So I'm telling you,
Mm.
figure out, what's the straw you need to breathe through to truly, truly understand what your customer is going through and then build that.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love that story about find the straw that you can breathe through. Actually experience, find a way to actually experience and understand. If a company managed to hire you for a month to come in and help them understand their customers, what would you do? Where would you start?
Well, I pass out straws. Uh, um,
And tell a story about a pharmaceutical company.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, I really, well, I'm not being facetious. Well, I'm not being as facetious as you might think, but I would tell them,
Hmm.
and let's assume it's going to be primarily male, right? Because that's just the inequity of the world right now. But
Mm-hmm.
I would tell them, you know what? Go ask your wife what you should make. Because I believe that women are better product designers and better empathizers and better understanders of marketing than men.
Mm.
So that would be one way. Um,
Oh, I love it.
wow, what's funny? That's true. So I there's a lot of truth to that, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, I think I love that thought. Are there any examples of, just because this comes up so often on the podcast, and I think I can't I've probably underestimated in the past how big of an issue this is, because if you don't empathize with your customers, then you end up going down this whole strategy and line that's completely irrelevant, and you build everything almost on sand, and that eventually shows itself and crumbles. And it really is more important and underpins a lot of other things that we can talk about around leadership. That's why I think it's so. I love having this chat with you, and I think a lot of leaders need to work on this. Are there any other examples that you can think of where you've really admired the way people have uh, really walked in the shoes of their customers? Anything from your time at Apple that you saw? And because I wonder how on earth did how on earth did through those years did Apple do that so well, and did Steve Jobs do that well? But even since, and with what you're doing now, any
Well,
stories where you think, wow, yeah, that was a great way to do that?
well, I have to say that, I I don't think that the word empathy has been often applied to Steve Jobs. Let's just say, okay. So, but again, repeating what I said before, you're not
Yeah.
Steve Jobs. So maybe Steve Jobs can do it without empathy, purely on vision or purely on the force of his personality to convince you to buy what he wants you to buy. But you're not Steve Jobs. So you better work on empathy. Okay. Just statistically work on empathy, not on being Steve Jobs. Okay. That's some good career advice for you.
Yeah, yeah, that is
And
good.
so now so now what do you do? And I mean, one way of built-in empathy is you build a product that you want to use, right? I mean, then you don't have to empathize with somebody else. You just empathize with yourself. And with Apple, I would say today, I don't see a lot of empathy from Apple. I mean,
Mm,
I see it. Don't get me wrong. I'm pure Apple right now, and they have great products and all that. But there are things that you just wonder. Are you a Macintosh user?
yeah, yeah, I am. I
Okay.
love
So,
Mac.
and
Yeah.
you have a laptop?
Yes.
Okay. So, until very recently, I'm a Mac user. I have I
Mm,
have several laptops. And for the life of me, you know, there are things that just bug me. Like you can't tell if it's charging or not because that little LED is gone, right? You have to
mm-hmm.
open it up and look for the lightning bar or the lightning thing in the charging, the battery icon in the upper right hand corner. So that's how you know it's charging by opening it up. You can't tell from across the room. Um, and then, have you ever tried to set up an Apple Wi Fi network? God help you. And if you look at a simple thing like, oh, system preferences.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts off organized by category. You can change it to alphabetical, which is what I do, but by category, like, have you ever looked at system preferences by category and tried to figure out how they categorize things? I mean, go ahead,
Yes.
everybody. Just put this podcast on hold for a second. Go to your system preferences, and if you have it organized by category, look for the printing preference. Tell me what category is that in. Then look for, energy saving. What category is that in? So, I mean, these are these little things. And imagine if you're a photographer and you have SD cards with 32 gigabytes of pictures, and oh, you have a recent MacBook or MacBook Air, and there's only 2 or 3 USB-C ports. So now you got to buy a dongle. Now, so you're buying a dongle to use your SD card, and then you have a label printer, and then you have a USB microphone, and then you have an external monitor, and then you have an external hard disk, and then you have Ethernet because you can't depend on wireless. I'll tell you, God's honest truth. My dongle used to have a dongle. Okay, wrap your mind around that. Now, people are wondering, what the hell is Guy talking about? So, a dongle is this thing that you stick into your USB C port that
Yeah.
has more ports on it, like several more USB A ports, an SD card reader, a micro SD card reader, Ethernet, you know. But I have so many devices, my dongle needed another dongle. How can that be? How can that be? Now, Apple might say, well, statistically, we've done the test, and of the 25 million Macs we sell a year, only 500,000 have the need for dongle. 24.5 million people, all they ever do is plug power into one of
Mm.
those 2 USB-C ports. In fact, there's an extra port for those people, and I tell you something, that may be true. I mean, I look at my kids and, you know, they don't ever print to a label. They don't use an XLR mic. They don't have an external hard disk. So uh, maybe Apple's right and I'm totally wrong. I'm telling you, I know a lot of people who just like, why do I need a dongle? And then I know some people like me, why do I need a dongle for my dongle? That is just beyond Thunderdome.
So you think there's you think how would so that might be an
How would
example
that be
of a
solved?
lack of empathy. Yeah, how would that potentially be solved? Like, what would it look like for you to go, yes, this is so easy?
Well, they recently announced a computer. They recently announced a computer, a MacBook Pro, that had all those things put back, right?
Hmm.
So okay, but I swear, Tim Cook must have a personal assistant. Tim Cook, if he uses a DSLR, takes the SD card out, gives it to his personal assistant, who then uploads it for him because he doesn't have a dongle. He doesn't know what a dongle is. And so, and if Tim Cook needs something, a label printed, I guarantee you he ain't hooking up a Dymo label printer to his MacBook Air in his Gulfstream. Okay, just ain't happening. And he probably has the like 16 terabyte internal SSD, so he probably doesn't even know what an external drive is. So, I mean, it would be nice if some of those executives at Apple or maybe some board of directors people would actually try to use Macintosh other than to answer email. Now, this may be unfair and all that, but I mean, if you look at the MacBook Air, seriously, can you honestly tell me, yeah, they really have SD cards in that world. They really have multiple devices. They have XLR microphones. They really are using it.
Hmm.
No, they're plugging it into power. That's all they're
Hmm.
doing.
It's interesting you mentioned that guy because I love the book Blue Ocean Strategy and the story they tell in the book,
Yeah.
which reminds me of what you just said about General Motors and how there was a season where a point in time where they really lost connection with the average person driving one of their cars,
Well,
and
and I
the
know what you're going to say.
yeah the
I
the
know what you're
connection
going to say.
the connection they made is that the executive team, guess what, they drove into work in their GM cars, went up to their office, and while they were at work, people were detailing, they were
Yep.
they were servicing, they were filling
Right.
up fuel. And so literally because of their position, they ended up completely removed from the reality of what it was like to use their products.
Yeah. And every year they got a new one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, how are you going to learn empathy?
It's hard, isn't it? We have a lot of educational leaders. I just want to pick one group because I know there's a lot of educational leaders. Either they lead universities or schools. There's one group. So let's say
Mhm.
schools. How do you? Because I see schools really struggle with this, and I scratch my head because I'm like, you are parents or you've been parents, and yet these school leaders, I think, really struggle to work out what parents really care about. In that example, would you have any advice for a school leader about how to get in the shoes of a parent with a 7-year old today in 2022?
Well, if there is a population in the world that I am willing to slide a break to, it is educators. Because I think educators do society's most important job for
Hmm.
the least amount of pay.
Yeah,
And
I
I don't
agree.
know what it's like in Australia, but in America, I mean, you look at what someone who works for Goldman Sachs makes versus what someone who teaches elementary school. We're
Yeah.
talking orders of magnitude difference. And like, who's more important to the world? Someone who teaches elementary school or a Goldman Sachs private equity person? Let me
Mm-hmm.
think about that for a second. Oh, I think it's the teacher. After much thought, I think it's the teacher. And, maybe we should just buy one less aircraft carrier and fund all of education. I just don't understand that. So, you know, I'm just telling you that I think education is the purest form of social service. And so I am not going to tell you how they can empathize more because they deserve every break they can get. Um, I could almost make the case that these parents should empathize with teachers more than teachers should empathize with parents.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair. I agree, and it's better in Australia than in the US, I would say. But it's one thing I've found working with school leaders in the UK as well is that one thing that is in common is that I agree, educators are doing arguably the most important work in the world, not only for low pay, but there's also incredibly high burnout. And it's something that I find a lot of school
Yeah.
leaders are now having to work out. How do we keep great teachers without them leaving? And it's a debacle as a society because they are doing the most important work.
I mean, truly, they are doing God's work.
Mm,
Truly,
yeah,
truly, they are
yeah.
doing God's work.
So good. Well, I respect that. I respect that call, and I think it's a good point, and I think it's an encouragement to educational leaders listening. I want to ask you a bunch of questions in Leadership Express because I'm really interested in hearing some of your thoughts. You ready?
Go far away.
What's a book, or you can pick a couple that you've gifted to others? This is a great question I got from Tim
Um,
Ferriss. I love his show.
yeah, the book is "If You Want to Write" by Brenda Hewland. It is about unshackling yourself from negativity, whether it's internal or external negativity, and being the writer, the speaker, the video maker, the movie maker, the marketer, the programmer, whatever it is, whatever's creative, helping you become more creative if you want to write. Brenda Hewlin. I
Yeah,
guarantee you will love this book.
that's wonderful. Thank you. What about right now? Are you in the middle of reading any books or any podcasts you're loving listening to, or any other blogs or anything that you're just really enjoying right now, Guy?
You know, I am such a content creator that I very seldom consume content other than news,
Mm-hmm.
with the exception that I interview at least 52 people a year. So about 45 times a year, I read a book. And
Yes.
so I read a book a week in order to prepare for interviews. I have to read one today for an interview for tomorrow. And so
Yes.
that's just the nature of my game.
Mm-hmm.
And a recent book that I liked a lot was a book by Katie Milkman. I
Mm-hmm.
can't even remember the title because when you read 52 a year, it's hard to remember the title. But she is a social psychologist at, I think, University of Pennsylvania. And it's that kind of, I love those kind of books. The Bob Cialdini books about influence and persuasion, it's in that ilk.
Yeah. How to Change the Science of Getting from Where You Are to Where You Want to Be by Katie Milkman. Is that the
Okay,
one
there
you're
you
talking
go.
about? Yeah. A
Yes.
quick Google. No, thank you. That's a great recommendation. Here's one. Do you have any favorite questions that you ask when you're interviewing on remarkable people? When you're in a one-on-one? When you're in a board meeting, an executive team meeting, sitting over lunch? Are there any questions that a Guy Kawasaki's sort of? Oh yeah, I probably asked that particular question quite a lot.
Well, to tell you the truth, with my podcast, and it's called Remarkable People, so I interview remarkable people, one of which is Melanie Perkins, the founder of Canva. She's
Mm.
truly remarkable. And so
Mm-hmm.
there is not a standard question that I ask everybody because they are so different. They go from Jane Goodall to Melanie Perkins. And, you know, I can ask Melanie about starting a company. I can't ask Jane about that. On the other hand, I can ask Jane about how do you build trust in a chimpanzee. I can't ask Melanie that.
Mm.
So honestly, my philosophy in podcasting is, first of all, let the guest talk. 95%
Mm.
guest, 5% me.
Mm-hmm.
And what I try to do is with the first question of the interview, I want to ask them a question that proves to them that I truly have done the research. I
Mm.
want someone to say, holy shit, Guy really did research on me. He didn't just read my Wikipedia entry. He's
Yeah.
asking, you know, is my daughter still playing the piano? Or, you know, has this thing that I mentioned in the 31st chapter really come true? Uh, I, I, I interviewed an actor named Josh Peck yesterday. Uh,
Mm.
I don't, I don't know if Drake and Josh ever went to Australia, but Josh Peck is the name of the actor. Anyway,
Yeah.
so in his book, he said when he turned in the book, he was just finishing, but it had not yet come out, a Disney series called Turner and Hooch. And so he was the detective in Turner and Hooch. And he says in the book, so, you know, as I'm writing this book, by the time you read it, for all I know, this series may be canceled. And you know what?
Mm,
It doesn't matter, because this was about his progression as an actor and a person. So he said, yeah, by the time
yeah.
you read this book, my series may be canceled and I don't care. So I asked him the question. All right. So actually, Josh, I hate to tell you, but as you know, Turner and Hooch was canceled. So, you know, do you still think it doesn't matter? To which he said yes. So, but I think the impact of a question like that is that, oh, guy really read the book. I mean, he really read the book, and he's asking me something that is somebody had to put two and two together, that I said in the book, by the time you read this, the series might be canceled. And and it's true, it was canceled, and guy called me on it. Now, that wasn't the first question I asked him, but it's that kind of question that I want to do. And so my job is to find that kind of question for every podcast guest. And let's
Yeah.
just say it is not trivial to do that.
Yeah. That's a wonderful approach. And I think we can all take something away from that, even if people aren't doing a podcast. I think that's a great thought around asking a question like that that
Well,
could work
I
in a
mean,
lot of contexts.
yeah, if you're listening to this and you're saying, so what the hell does that have to do with me? I don't have a podcast. Well, I will tell you what it has to do with you. So when you're in a job interview, you need to figure out a question or a couple questions that clearly communicates to the boss or the recruiter or whatever that you truly have done your research, right? That
Hmm.
you didn't just read about the Wikipedia entry for Apple or Google or the startup. You truly have done the research. Or if you're meeting with your future boss, you studied her LinkedIn profile, so you know that she worked at Apple and Steve Jobs was at Apple. So your opening question might be, tell me about what it was like to work at Apple. Because if I were the person
Mm.
interviewing you, and that was your first question to me in an interview, irrelevant as it may seem, I would say, this person at least knows how to use LinkedIn and put in the effort to, read LinkedIn and figure
Hmm.
that out and ask me this question. So, this person is rising to the top of the stack of resumes. So
Mm.
that is no different than what I do for a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Um, Great
Or,
thought.
the
What?
same thing applies for pitching a venture capitalist. Right? If
Mm,
you can
yeah.
ask the venture capitalist, so I see that you love surfing. I love surfing too. Or I see that you were an investor in take the worst case, Terranos. So you know what got no, you might not get hired if you or you might not get the money if you ask that. But my point is, it shouldn't be so. What do you do at the firm? What a dumbass question. Why don't you just
Yeah.
say, "Don't fund me"? Just put a little sticky on your forehead. Don't fund me.
Oh, I love it. What's a recent leadership lesson you've learned for the first time or been reminded of?
Oh man, I huh, I learn that every day. You got me there. When you put the word recent, um, I learned the value of having a virtual assistant to help you. That's a recent lesson
Yeah,
because I am just swamped. Yeah,
that's good.
and
No,
she
that's
is
good.
better at being me than I am.
That's amazing. I love that. Okay, here's one. What is a commonly held belief in your industry that you passionately disagree with?
Well, which industry are you referring to when you say in your industry? Because I'm in several.
Yeah. Let's go startups in terms of VC thinking, sort of venture capital and startups, if that's okay.
Sure. Okay, so for that one, I would say a very a very dubious assumption is that um, investors invest in teams of great people. Now, this is not to
Mm,
say that they don't invest in teams of great people or they're not looking for teams of great people. But my perspective is that at the time you need to squeeze the trigger, you have no idea if the team is really great. And frankly, there is no way to prove that. unless you have already built a $1 billion successful company. Melanie Perkins doesn't have to prove she's a great
Mm.
entrepreneur the next time she ever has to raise money, which she never will get to raise money. But let's just say that if you are proven to the point of being that successful and that good, you probably are not in the room asking for $1 million in seed capital, right? So almost
Mm.
by definition, if you're pitching a VC, it's because you're not proven as a leader. If you were proven as a leader, you wouldn't need to be in the room.
Mm.
So the question becomes, well, why does everybody say it? I need to present a world-class team to get an investment. It's because they went to some panel, and on the panel were 5 venture capitalists. And the moderator asked, what do you look for in a company you invest in? And guess what all 5 clones said? They said, we look for world-class teams. So they took notes and they said, okay, in my pitch, I have to prove that I'm a world class team. So they spent 20 minutes doing that, at the end of which the investors still don't know what the hell your company does. And so, you know what? My take on this is that you need to show them a product or a service that changes their pulse, that makes them excited. And
Mm.
if you get that, then they might inquire about your background as a team. But just spending most of the pitch proving you're a world class team is, well, first of all, you can't prove that you're a world class team. And you probably aren't a world class team for the reasons I mentioned, that if you're raising money, by definition, you're not a world class team. So
Mm.
you start off and you show them either a great product or a great service that just makes their freaking heads explode, or you say, using seed capital and bootstrapping, we have already gotten to the point where, I don't know, pick a number, 1,000 people are signing up for our service a day. And so now we need expansion capital. They'll pay attention. Guess what? If you started off with a mind exploding demo, or
Mm.
by saying bootstrapping, we now have 1,000 people signing up for our service every day, guess what? You will not have to talk about your team.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. That's
It's great.
definitely,
It's
I hadn't
yeah.
thought about that
But you
before,
know what?
so that's helpful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, seriously, if you think about it, just imagine the pitch that Apple made, right? Let's see. This is my buddy Waz, and the two of us went to high school together, and he's been building these like computers in the garage, and we sold 20 to the homebrew computing company. And no, I'm sorry, I didn't finish college, and neither did my buddy Was. And well, what have you been doing? I don't know, like kind of like smoking marijuana. I went to India. I studied yoga. And Was was cracking the AT&T long distance system. Almost got us arrested. So that's our world class team. You want to invest in Apple? Well, okay. I mean, no, that's an
You're right.
extreme example, but I'm telling you, that's so. I'm telling you that the key to a pitch is making their heads explode with your product. You do that, everything else is easy. If you don't do that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you went to Stanford, got a Harvard MBA, and worked for McKinsey and Goldman Sachs. It doesn't matter.
Mm. What would you say to someone who's trying to, I guess, get a startup off the ground, but they're still in the invention sort of phase of really designing the product? How do you, and this is probably the $1 trillion question, isn't it? But how do you design a product or service that raises someone's pulse? Any tips or any things that you would say, well, don't do that?
Well, I'm getting repetitious, but I'm telling you, just build the product that you want to use and just hope the hell that you're not the only nutcase. So, I mean, I don't think it's being quote unquote market driven.
Mm.
So, I mean,
Yeah, no,
that's
and it's
just the
good. I
way it
enjoy a
is.
theme. I like, and I like that you've mentioned that a couple of times because it's good advice. Speaking of advice, I wanted to ask you: is there anything that comes to mind as you think back over your career where someone, there was a piece of advice someone gave you, and it comes to mind as really, really good advice, a great piece of advice that's really stuck with you for some reason?
Well, I think what qualifies for that for me is never ask people to do something that you would not do, whether that's
Mm,
go through CAPTCHA or fly coach to the other side of the world or put your credit card
yeah.
down for a free account or anything like that. Or never ask your employee, your vendor, your partner, and certainly not your customer to do something you would not do. Now, of course, this assumes that you're not some kind of psychopathic nutcase, but you get my drift, right? It's-
Yeah, that's great. What's a big struggle or problem that you see leaders facing in, let's pick, well, you can pick another, sort of pick a hat that you're wearing in one of those sectors. Pick one of those, and I'd love to know what's a big problem or challenge you're seeing leaders face in that particular industry.
well, uh, I mean, every leader is facing the challenge of sales. I mean,
Mm,
let's face it, sales fixes everything, which is another little wisdom for people that, you
yeah.
know, as long as you've got sales and you've got cash, you're still in the game. The leading cause
Hmm.
of death of companies is running out of money. So don't
Yeah.
run out of money. And as long as you're not running out of money, you're still in the game. So it is that simple. And when you have sales, guess what? Your venture capitalists don't bother you because they have other companies that do not have sales. And so they're out there triaging them. So be the company with sales, they won't bother you.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. And what is it about sales that we get so distracted about everything else? And why do we fail? I
Well,
just think it's, why do we fail to see how important it is and lose sight of how it, like, you just nailed it. That's so true.
well, I think the truth is not that people are distracted from sales, but because their product sucks, they're not achieving sales. And so,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
else are they going to do? They have to blow smoke. And
Mm.
so, when you blow smoke, you're trying to cover the fact that if you don't have sales, because frankly, if you had sales, every board meeting would be easy. We're up 50%. Any questions? End of board meeting. That's how it should be. Now, if you're down 50%, then you say, well, this partnership failed, but here's how we're going to do this. And this is version 2 coming, and let me give you a demo of version 2 fixes all the problems in version 1. And then, you have to like jump through all these gyrations and all this kind of stuff. But if you have
Mm.
sales, you just say, hey, sales are up 50% and we can barely keep it in stock. What are your other questions?
Yeah, gee,
That's
that's
it.
good. I
That's
mean,
all you
it's
need to know.
simple. That's so true, though. It's so simple, but it's so true. It does, it does fix everything. What about for you? I guess in your downtime, or there might be something that really impacted you at a meaningful level. But do you have any movies or TV shows that are just, for some reason, tell you what, on this podcast, and I love asking leaders this question because we chat about serious topics. But then I've had Golden Girls, Seinfeld, so it doesn't have to be serious. I know. Do you have any sort of favorite movies or TV shows even right now?
Okay. Uh Well, I just got through. I don't know if you get the same TV shows we have, but I just got through watching a series called Yellowstone, which is about life in Montana, and how Silicon Valley's trying to invade Montana, and this family's trying to maintain their. It's a very
Mm.
dark, but just you mentioned Golden Girls and that kind of stuff, but let me give you the gist. All right, so the gist
Yeah,
of the kind of things that I like to watch and read, by the way,
yeah.
is more or less like, you know, retired Navy SEAL living with his wife and daughter. They get killed by terrorists, because they were in a train station in New York City. And so the Navy SEAL goes into a drug and alcohol binge, trying to recover from this devastating act of terrorism that took the only things that he loved. And so he's deep in this dark hole. And next thing you know, you hear these helicopters, and this helicopter lands on his lawn, and these people with earphones, hanging over their um, ears knock on the door. and they say, "Get your ass up, get in a helicopter." He doesn't know what's happening. They get in a helicopter. Next thing you know, they're landing on the south lawn of the president's house, the White House, and they go and see the president, and the president says, "Listen, freaking CIA can't do shit. FBI can't do shit. National Security Agency can't do shit. So here's a presidential pardon in advance. I just want you to go out and kill all the bad guys." Gets back in the helicopter, goes home. He presses a button. The back of his closet opens up, and there's like, there's sniper, there's grenades, there's Stinger missiles, and he puts all this stuff on. And he goes out. And he starts killing bad guys, and in the meantime, he falls in love with this woman, but she might be a Mossad operative. We're really not sure. So that's the kind of stuff I watch. Just FYI, not Golden Girls. That's the kind of stuff I'm interested in.
I love that. Yellowstone is in Australia. We do have the same shows.
You do?
So is that were you?
You do?
Yeah, we do. We do. Just they usually come to us about 2 years later. That's what happens in Australia anyway.
Ah.
Well, that's what used to happen. Where everyone would be like waiting for the local Netflix down here before Netflix sort of came here, or when they did. Everyone, yeah, it wasn't necessarily easy to see the great shows that everyone was talking about online in Australia. Put it that way.
Well, but we're in the United States, and we're waiting for the next episode of Bondi Beach Boys or whatever it's called. So it all evens out.
That's right. Oh man, that's great. I love. Now, was that a particular show you were describing, or was that just a new book by Guy Kawasaki coming out soon?
That's every other show on Netflix, basically.
Hey, I tell you what. I would watch that. That was good. You had me. You had me with that script, Guy.
Man, you have low taste in video.
I do. You know what's funny though? I've had one of the shows that's been mentioned multiple times recently is Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And have you seen Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
Have you seen that one?
I never really got into it. The other kind of genre I love is Scandinavian detective shows. Man, Scandinavian detective shows, they are very dark. And like I loved Oslo. Was it Oslo? What's the one where
I haven't seen Oslo.
It's kind of okay, it's coming true right now. So Oslo, I think it was called Oslo. Well, anyway, Russia, guess what? Here's the storyline.
Yeah.
Russia invades Norway because Norway is going green and is making nuclear plants that's going to reduce the need for oil. So Russia takes over Norway. Huh.
Yeah, that's right. Ring any bells?
Yes.
Is it occupied?
Scandinavian.
Occupied?
Occupied, not Oslo. Yeah. I'm glad you can use Google better than I can. So anyway, I'm that's fast. Another one.
Have you seen, you know what? This is so good. I love incorporating this at the end of all of my leadership conversations with great leaders from around the world. It's such a fun way to end the episodes. There's a great show.
See what clowns they are?
Help everyone feel a bit better about themselves. No, it's good to see behind. Yeah. You know what's a great movie that you should watch? It's Spanish. I was thinking whether it was Scandinavian. It's called The Invisible Guest. If you haven't seen The Invisible Guest, if you enjoy a foreign movie, Spanish mystery thriller film, one of the best movies I've seen recently. Anyone who loves it is more thriller mystery, but it just reminded me of your Scandinavian shows that you mentioned. But that's a great movie.
What's it called again? I gotta write this down because
you'll love it. It's called The Invisible Guest.
I'm not making this up. I'm in my office and I only have styluses. I don't have any pens. Invisible Guest. Okay, I can remember 2 words.
You can remember the Invisible Guest. I'll tell you what, I'll send that to you. When I send you an email after this, I'll send you a link to the Invisible Guest, Guy. That'll be top. That'll be before anything else. That'll be before the link to share this. I'll send you that note. I'm aware of the time. I know that I'm just been loving this conversation so much. I've gone a bit over time. Do you have a little bit more time for a couple more questions, or do you need me to start wrapping things up?
They're short, yeah.
Okay, I'll ask you a couple
I
more
gotta
short
eat.
questions. Yeah, that's right. It's true. You've been very kind with your time. Okay, couple more that I just
I
really
need a
want to
flat
ask
white.
you. Yeah. Well, by the way, coffee, I don't know when you last came to Australia, but gee, next time you're in Brisbane, the coffee up here is fantastic. If you're a coffee drinker.
I've been to Brisbane.
Oh, I know personally the roaster of some of the best coffee in the world who's up here in Brisbane.
Oh yeah,
Black
that's
Star
good to know.
Coffee, incredible. Anyway, next time you're
Huh.
here, Black Star Coffee.
Wait, is
It's hmm.
I might take you up on that. Wait, is Brisbane
Yep.
on the Gold Coast? Okay,
Brisbane's
yeah.
north
So
of the
I've
Gold
definitely
Coast.
been there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Now that
north
the
of the Gold.
borders are open, we just opened our borders a few days ago. But I'm a
Oh,
coffee
really?
fanatic. I panic bought coffee. I know you got to eat, but I had to tell you that story. When everyone else was panic buying toilet
Somebody,
paper, I went out.
yeah,
I
you
no
bought
joke.
coffee.
I bought coffee. I went and I told my wife, I said, I just went and panic bought coffee because they announced, potential lockdowns. And I just went to Black Star up the road and bought coffee and took it home. And I was like, wow, okay,
That's
this is
funny.
seriously, I'm passionate. I went and everyone's panic buying toilet paper. Jonno's panic buying coffee. Okay, let me get to a question. That was, you had me on coffee. You mentioned a flat white. See, um, okay. Here's one. What's the best thing you're doing, or you're seeing others do it? Canva, or where you're just like recently you've been like, oh, that's a fantastic strategy, leadership. Like, what's something right now that you're doing or someone else is doing where you're going, that's just really brilliant as in leadership in marketing.
Stunning silence here. I mean, if if you were to apply the test of brilliance, now I'm not gonna. I could tell you about some very brilliant things that Canva is doing, but it's too conflicted for me to tell you that. Okay, so just assume
Okay,
I would have. So let's take Canva off the table. But
sure.
man, there's a short. I don't even have anybody on that list. Not a lot of brilliance going on. I can tell you some absolute total worst marketing in the world, but no.
Okay, what's the
So
worst marketing in the
we're
world you're
gonna
seeing?
what's oh, the Republican Party of the United States by far. I mean, they think that somehow with the changing demographics that they're going to somehow preserve white supremacy or something. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, talk about a non-marketing driven world. I don't understand it. Of course, now they'll
Yeah,
prove me
yeah.
wrong and take over the United States. Yeah.
No, no, that counts. I'll take that as an example. Anything else? Were you about to say something else?
Nope. That's it. That's
No.
the worst example of marketing in the world. The Republican Party of the United States. It's either the best or the worst, but it's not in the middle.
Okay, two more questions, and then I'll let you go because I just I value
You
this
said
so
two more,
much. But
one ago.
did I really? I get
That's
see.
okay.
I
Go
told
ahead.
you before. I said I need to not get too excited chatting with you, guy, because I've been looking forward to this so much. One more question. If
Yes.
if you're sitting in Brisbane over a wonderful coffee with a young
Yeah.
leader, if you could only give a young leader one piece of advice, one piece of leadership advice, what would you say?
I would say, well, young leader meaning this person's in a startup. I mean, tell me more about this person because the advice changes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they're in a startup. They're mid-20s. They've sort of
Yeah.
had some success already, but now they're about to branch out, go on their own, and they're about to launch a startup.
Okay. So, man, I got a bunch of advice for this person. So, first of all, sales fixes everything. That's number one.
Hmm.
Number two, hire people who are better than you. Number three, give up this theory of work life balance. There are times in your life you're just going to work your ass off, and there's going to be times in life when you're going to play your ass off. The two are not going to happen at the same time. So get over it. There.
Boom. Fantastic. Wonderful advice. Well, I have no more questions because I need to I need to respect your time. Hey, thank you so much. For those who want to find you and your podcast, just quickly, do you want to just give a quick summary of just again of the
Sure.
name of the podcast and where people can find you,
Yeah.
Guy?
My my name, excuse me. The name of my podcast is Remarkable People. It's at remarkablepeople.com. And basically, I am on a mission to make you remarkable by interviewing remarkable people for their inspiration and knowledge. That's it in a nutshell. And I can get to more remarkable people than anybody in the world, except for maybe, I don't know, except for maybe Michelle Obama. I don't know. I can get to remarkable people, trust me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay.
That's great. Well, thank you so
Alrighty.
much for coming on the
Thank
podcast,
you.
Guy. And
Alrighty. All my
I really
best.
appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much. You have enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, I'm gonna go have my Vegemite.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me, well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 questions on leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And you know, my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jonno White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.